working because I needed to work. I was working part-time in a clothing store, selling clothes, selling men's clothes. And I said, well, if you have a talent for writing, you should be able to make some money out of this. So how do you do that? Well, again, I didn't really know anybody who was making money writing. But it occurred to me, these guys who write for newspapers, they must get paid. So I sat down one Saturday, and I wrote a couple of essays. And I also pulled out some of the stuff I had done for my college publication, got the name of the managing editor of the daily newspaper called the Chicago Sun-Times from the masthead, got the address from the masthead, and I sent him a letter along with samples, the writing samples that I had produced. And I basically said in my letter, I would like a job. These are my writing samples. Please get in touch with me if you think that would be something that would work out. Again, didn't hear anything. And I must have sent the letter in maybe September. So by the time a couple of months had passed, I was getting impatient. So I finally picked up the phone. And I actually get the guy on the phone. He was a managing editor, and his name was Ralph Otwell. And I get him on the telephone. And I say to him, well, Mr. Otwell, this is Ellis Cose. Did you get the materials that I sent you? He said, yes, I did. I said, well, great. Well, do you have an opinion about them? He says, well, actually, they're pretty good. I said, well, that's wonderful. So when do I start work? And he said, young man, why don't you come down and meet me? We should have a conversation. So I go down to the Chicago Sun-Times downtown. It was then located in a building 401 North Wabash. I go down there, meet the managing editor. And he sits me down, and he basically says, look, at that time, I guess I was 18. He said, look, we don't hire 18-year-old kids to be columnists in our newspaper. But you seem to be a bright guy, and you have some talent. So I'll tell you what I'm going to do with you. And I'm all ears at this point. He says, I'm going to hire you. Yeah, I'm going to give you a job as an editorial assistant. So you can learn something about how newspapers work, and you can actually write a little bit. The editorial assistant does sort of gopher work, and you write like little things for the weather reports and stuff like that. He said, you can learn how a news organization works. He said, but in addition, I'm going to do something else. I said, yeah? He says, I'm going to give you a column, not in the newspaper, but there's a publication that we send out to high schools for our Reading in the Schools program. And it has 50,000 circulation, and it goes to high schools throughout Chicago. I'm going to give you a column in that, once a week. And in addition to what we're paying you to be an editorial assistant, we'll pay you $50 extra a week to write that. I said, sure, that sounds like a good deal to me. And all of a sudden, I'm a columnist for this thing. Just to complete that story, the end of the school year comes, and I get called into the BIC editor's office, the editor-in-chief. And I had not really met him before, but I figured that I had pretty good feedback from my column I was writing for the high school thing. So I figured they were basically going to call me in and tell me that we're suspending this thing for the summer, and you're going to lose $50 a week that you were getting. But we started up again, when the fall comes. So I was prepared for that discussion. But instead, he goes and says, Ellis, I've been reading you, and da-da-da-da-da, and I think it's interesting the stuff you've been producing, da-da-da-da-da. And I'm going to say, where's this guy going? And he turns to me finally and says, look, he says, what do you think of this? Starting Monday, I'm going to give you a column in the real newspaper. I said, really? He said, yeah. I said, what do you think of that? And again, I'm at that point, I'm 19 years old, I guess. And I say, well, that's really what I wanted all the time. He says, well, now you got it.